Good evening, everybody. My name is Wayne Ranney, and I serve on the board of directors for the Grand Canyon Historical Society. And we welcome you to tonight's virtual outing. The Grand Canyon Historical Society, our mission is to celebrate and promote the study and preservation of the Grand Canyon region's cultural and natural history for the education and enjoyment of its members and the public. And just last year in 2024, we celebrated 40 years of existence when the society was started by some pioneer members of Grand Canyon Village. We encourage you to become a member. Our dues are only $35 a year. We are an all-volunteer organization, and we're hopeful that many of you can join us so that we can continue to expand all of our activities like these virtual outings and in-person outings and our tri-annual history symposiums. If you do become a member, you'll get 4 issues in the calendar year of the Old Pioneer magazine, which has a lot of history articles about the Grand Canyon and the Grand Canyon region. So we do these virtual outings. We conduct tours at the South and North Rim, and you can find it on our website. Our website is very easy, grandcanyonhistory.org.
I'm a park ranger here at Grand Canyon. I've been working with the National Park Service for about 6 years now. And here at Grand Canyon for a little over a year. I started in 2021 here as an Interpretive Park Ranger. It was really great that I got asked to do this presentation because ever since I've been at Grand Canyon, and I only grew up like 2.5 hours from the park. So for like elementary school visits and like field trips, we would come to Grand Canyon, and you kind of just see nothing but this dominant pioneer explorer narrative here at the park. And yeah, I just remember coming here for these multiple field trips and never seeing anything about the Native people. And if there was something about Indigenous people, we were kind of talked about in a past tense. So I added this photo of the sign I took of the Bright Angel Trail. And on the sign, it calls Native people prehistoric. So that's something that we're working on here in the park to try to address, is that like, no, Native people are not a thing of the past, like we're still here. So that's kind of the reason why I was asked to do this presentation tonight. So yeah. A little more about me. As Tom said, I'm a 4th generation park ranger. This is my great grandfather and his brother Floyd Laughter at Navajo National Monument when he was a ranger there. And I want to start out this presentation with this quote talking about stewards of the land. Our traditional like Indigenous beliefs in many cultures, we like to refer to ourselves as stewards and not owners, because there's a huge, huge difference between those two terms. As it says on this quote, it talks about how we have this intricate, respectful, and protective relationship with our natural environments. So historically, we've always been stewards of the land, not owners. The difference is important. Whereas ownership implies dominance, stewardship refers to a responsibility for the well-being of nature and all of its creatures. So that's a really common value that like I said, that many Indigenous cultures have for this presentation. I would also like to mention that although I am a Diné tribal member, I'm not like speaking on the behalf of my tribe or any of the other tribes that are mentioned in this presentation. Many of this information I'm about to share comes from literature, from talking to tribal members themselves, and then my own experiences growing up on the res. So yeah, here at Grand Canyon, as some of you may know, we have 11 associated tribes. So that dark green area there is the boundaries of the national park. And these colorful blobs around it are kind of the historical areas of where tribes are and continue to be. In a lot of Indigenous cultures, we don't really believe in boundaries because a long time ago and even now, migration happened a lot. We're always on the move. So we're moving from place to place. And that's why we don't really believe in these like maps or territories. that are drawn out like this. But this is the best map I could find that kind of just gave a gist of, again, where these dominant areas the people were and continue to be. So to the south of us and more to the west, inside the canyon, we have the Havasupai and the Wallapai. Havasupai is, if any of you ever got the chance to go out to their tribal lands and do the hike to Havasu, that's a really, really cool thing to do. I heard they just opened their permits back up for the month of February. But yeah, that's where those turquoise blue waterfalls are, Mooney Falls, Beaver Falls, and you can get a permit to hike down there. The Wallapai are further to the west. Every single day we get asked about the skywalk, and we're like, that's not here, it's over on the west side of the west rim. And we also have to explain to people that's not part of the National Park Service, it's a tribal park. And that's the Wallapai who operate that out there. And you'll notice a lot of tribal nations today heavily rely on tourism. So like I just mentioned, the backpacking trip to Havasupai, and now the West Rim over on Wallapai lands. All this pink you see is the several bands of Paiute. So we got a Las Vegas band, a Moapa band, the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah, who like to refer to themselves as Shibwits. We also have the Kaibab band of Paiute, who are more on the North Rim and like Southern Utah, Northern Arizona, right across from us. San Juan Southern Paiute, that's also further up in Southern Utah. If you know where Navajo Mountain is, there are communities in that area. That's up by Lake Powell. And then more to our east, we have the Navajo Nation, where I'm from. I grew up in the small community of Shanto, Arizona, about an hour from Lake Powell, hour from Monument Valley. It's a very, very small community of 500 people. And we have our own National Park Service sites there on the Navajo Nation, Hubble Trading Post, Canyon de Chelly, and Navajo National Monument. And then smack right in the middle of Navajo Nation are the three Hopi Mesas, we call Hopi land. So that's where they're at today. And then the Zuni are more further to the east, more like in western New Mexico and eastern Arizona. And then to our south, if you ever go down towards Phoenix off the interstate, there's like the Cliff Castle Casino and all that by Camp Verde. That's Yavapai Apache. And then, oh yeah, that's all of them. So yeah, those are the 11 associated tribes, just to give you an idea of where they're located in regards to where we're at today. So the human history here goes very, very far back. According to many tribe stories, our creation stories, meaning like how we got here and came to be, say that we've been here since the beginning of time. And a lot of the tribes consider their emergent stories here in the canyon. And I'll get into that a little bit further into the presentation. But according to like the Western perspectives, as we say, it says humans have been here at Grand Canyon for at least like about 12,000 years. That's like the estimated, that's the theory. And that's based on these physical objects we've found here throughout the canyon. And some of you may have seen these in person with your own eyes, because we were talking about the museum collections here at the park, and they have lots and lots of these artifacts there. And this one on the left is referred to as a split twig figurine. It's most commonly made from willow, which is found down by the river. And some of these figurines date back like a couple thousand years. So these are really, really old in regards to the oldest, like tangible, solid objects that have been found in the canyon in connection to the native presence here. There's many theories on what these may have been used for. The most common is a hunting ritual, because these split twig figurines have been found up in the caves here in the park. And they believe they're intricately placed there, like placed there with a purpose, because they're found underneath rocks and near like petroglyph and pictograph panels. And even some have been found with a little stick sticking out of the body area here. So that big theory is that these were used in a hunting ritual, because back then people were living day to day, and a big thing they survived on was what they were able to hunt here in the canyon. which is most likely big animals like deer, and a lot of the smaller animals like rabbits and squirrels. And of course, later on, what they planted in the canyon, like corn, beans, and squash. So yeah, that's our split twig figurine here. It could just be a toy for kids because, you know, kids are kids. So that's another theory too. Over on the right is one of the pottery that have been found here. Pottery making still happens today. It's a practice that's been passed down from generation to generation. And a lot of these intricate like spirals and designs you see on here usually reference the elements, like the natural landscape. From what I've heard growing up, they say like the little zigzags could represent lightning, the spirals can represent water. So when you see these on these pots like this, it's like telling us a story. It's telling us what this object may have been used for. A lot of them are used for ceremonial purposes. A lot's used to collect water. There's a lot of runoff coming off the canyon walls. And then there's a type of pottery called grayware. When you go out and see pottery sherds and they're just like this grayish clay color, that was used for everyday use for cooking and gathering water. We used to say it's like the Tupperware back then. So that's types of pottery, and this is a practice still done today. Another thing in the canyon is our pictographs and petroglyphs. The difference is that pictographs here on the left are usually painted onto the rock wall with a plant or mineral dye. And then petroglyphs are usually etched into the canyon wall with some type of hard object, usually like a sharp stone. And a lot of these are really, really old petroglyphs. You can usually find this, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about when I say desert varnish, but when you look at a sandstone wall and see that black streaks coming down the wall, that's what Native people were using as like, I guess you could say a canvas to carve in petroglyphs into those. And I learned that that desert varnish, like it only gathers to a size of a sheet of paper over like 50,000 years. So that's why it's a good thing to carve into, and why some of these petroglyphs are not like recovered back up by that desert varnish. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, those are the petroglyphs and pictographs. A lot of these represent clan symbols. A lot of them represent the animals, like hunting. Some of them are ceremonial. But yes, the main pictographs and petroglyphs found here at the canyon, a lot of them are clan symbols. And what clans are long ago, you're a group of people. And maybe back then you had similar skill sets, similar interests. So you were kind of banded together with this group of people. Because again, you're surviving day to day and you heavily need to rely on others to survive. And clans, they would migrate with each other, they would live together, they would support each other. It's a strong sense of kinship. And today that's trickled down to us living Native people, where clans are still in existence today. So mine are Lokatene Bashishchin, Bilagana Dashache, Tabahan Dashanele. And that's how I'll usually introduce myself to other Native, well, I say Navajo people. And that's how we establish a sense of kinship to each other. Even though we're not blood related, we can still be clan related. And that's how you know to help each other out. And that's your family, like your dad, your mom, your sister, again, even though you're not blood related. So it's just a huge, huge deal, a big part of our identity, where we still have tribal members today going down into the canyon and doing their own prayers and offerings to these symbols, just to acknowledge where we come from and where our clan was established. When I worked at Navajo National Monument, we had the Fire Clan symbol for the Hopi near one of the cliff dwelling sites. And I had a Hopi teenager on my tour one time. And once he saw that, he's like, hey, Fire Clan. He's like, I'm Fire Clan. And that was really cool that he connected to that, because that pictograph dated back at least 700 years. So yeah, that just shows how important these petroglyphs and pictographs here are in the canyon. And that's why you'll see at a lot of national parks that say not to graffiti on the sandstone walls, because we're trying to preserve these that have been here for so long and that tribal members today have a connection to. As I mentioned earlier, I don't feel very comfortable speaking on like behalf of my own tribe and other tribes. So I wanted to include this short clip of Jim Enote. He's a Zuni tribal member. You may have seen this before. This is on the Voices of the Grand Canyon website, but he's going to talk about the pictographs and petroglyphs found on Zuni lands and here at Grand Canyon. It's just a really short clip. I hope the audio works.
I'm Jim Enote, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Colorado Plateau Foundation. And we are here in Zuni Pueblo lands in what is now New Mexico. The Grand Canyon we call Chimikianikatea, our place of emergence. It is the place that all the tribes have in common, is that they respect that place. So these petroglyphs that we see here, we see many of the same ones in the Grand Canyon. Some of them are clan symbols, some of them are different symbols pertaining to movement and migration, but they are the same ones that we see in the Grand Canyon. These petroglyphs, they're telling us that we should never forget where we came from. And when we go to the Grand Canyon and we see the same markings there, it's always this my goodness moment. It's true.
Yeah, so that just shows how our past is very much connected to our present. And it's really important that message gets across today, because there aren't just pictograph and petroglyph panels in the canyon. There's also other sites like this one here. A lot of you most likely know where this is at, but yeah, this is down by the river. And we usually refer to these as spiritually occupied. So there's harmful terminology out there that calls these sites ruins or abandoned, or it's a mystery of where the people went, when in reality that sites like this across the Southwest, they're still occupied in a spiritual sense. And where we still go to these sites, again, to do these prayers and offerings to it, because places like this help sustain our ancestors. A lot of these cliff dwelling sites are storage areas. They'll usually store their crops that they grew, like corn, beans, squash, melons. They'll put them into these nice, cool storage areas. And you can see the rectangle shape. They'll put a rectangle slab of rock over that. At some sites, you'll see yucca braided loops on each side of the doorway, where a stick would have been slid across to keep that wooden slab in place, sorry, the rock slab in place. And then they'll seal it up with more clay and mortar. And then whenever they need what's inside there, they'll break it open. It was most likely used in the wintertime when they weren't growing their crops. So yeah, that's a really important message to get across. And it's important to respect these sites, because again, there's still that connection, and even from a physical standpoint, where we come to these places and it's believed that our ancestors are still here. A lot of these sites in the canyon are connected to the Zuni and the Hopi people. I wanted to include some of the names of the canyon according to the different tribes. I'm not going to attempt to say any of these. I don't want to butcher any of them. But yeah, these are some of the names that the canyon has from these different tribal perspectives. And a general translation of them would be that it's a living library of ecological knowledge. It's a place where humanity and nature are connected. So that's like the general gist of the translations of these. And I want to include this quote from Tim Begay, who does a lot with our intertribal working group here at the park. He's Dene, and he explains what the canyon's called in the Navajo language. And in the Navajo language, a lot of our words are descriptive. So when we say certain things, it's really just giving you a description of what it looks like or what it does. So that's how he explains the Grand Canyon, where you can see upriver and downriver. And a lot of these places, and this name is said in our like songs and prayers. So yeah, that's the different names that people have for the canyon. And since I've been working here in 2021, I've had the opportunity to work with tribal members directly through Intertribal Working Group and other opportunities. And while working with these tribal members, the most common phrase I hear them when they talk about the canyon is they call it a living landscape. And that just kind of shows how we have the strong belief that everything in the canyon is a living entity. So I wanted to include these two quotes from a Wallapai tribal member and a Diné woman. I'll start with the Wallapai one, where how we regard everything in the canyon, the river, as a living entity, infused with this conscious spirit. And all of these physical elements here have powers of observation and awareness, including the air, land, water, plants, animals, and the stars. Like everything has a spirit deserving of respect. And a lot of these things, every little thing you'll see has many, many stories that go along with it. And that's kind of what this Diné woman says, like it's going to take many years to tell all these stories that we have about these different places, even just here at the Grand Canyon. You'll notice that oral history is very important to a lot of Native nations because writing wasn't very existent for many cultures until very recently. To provide a personal example, my dad, my grandma, great-grandma, the generations before them, they all speak Diné fluently, but something they can't do is read or write Diné. So that just shows how new of a concept writing is to a lot of our cultures, such as the Diné culture. And a lot of these stories about these places are usually told in the wintertime, because that's when the plants are dormant and the animals are hibernating and sleeping, because we talk about things when they're not around. But yeah, so that's really the importance of oral history in our language and why we really need to keep our language alive, because we can't afford to lose these stories that we have of this place. So one of the important resources here at the canyon is water, which is very obvious because without the water, without the river, there would be no Grand Canyon. So there's a very common saying in the Diné language called "Two e'ena," which means water is life. And I was working with one of our Wallapai tribal interns here, and he said they have a similar saying, which translates to water is a relative. And a lot of these phrases, as Tim Begay said in the couple previous slides, that a lot of these phrases are said in our songs and prayers, because without water, there's no us, like we can't exist without it. So you'll always hear these phrases said in a way to give thanks and for us to connect to this place, because that's what sustained our ancestors. There's many springs, many waterfalls here in the canyon, and those are important, those are sacred. Again, working with the tribal members here at the park, that's something they want emphasized here, is they want that relayed to park visitors on how important the water, the springs here are to us. So that way when they come to recreate or visit, they know to pay these areas with respect. So yeah, water in the canyon. Oh, I guess I kind of just talked about that. Yeah, there's that quote. So yeah, it's beautiful to look at, but we really want like visitors and tourists to recognize that this still has a cultural significance for modern day living Indigenous people. And this is the Havasu Falls over on the Havasupai Reservation, the one that you can backpack to if you get a permit through the tribe. But yeah, so usually when we visit sites like this, we'll do a prayer and offering. I got to go down to the river last spring, and usually I take like a little corn pollen with me. We call it petadine, or Usually you take a dried corn kernel and you'll just put it in the water and do a prayer for yourself. And you say a prayer to help protect you and bring good things to yourself, while at the same time making this offering to it. So it's a very reciprocal relationship that we have to these landscapes. You always got to give back what you take. So this is a place in the canyon that some people may have been to. It's Ribbon Falls off of the North Kaibab Trail. If you ever do a rim to rim hike or hiking down in the canyon. And it's a very, very culturally significant place to the Zuni people because this is considered their place of emergence. This is a quote from Ronnie, who unfortunately passed away this past year, but he committed and contributed a lot to the park in terms of sharing different Zuni knowledge about these places in the canyon. But yeah, he talks about how he's the head priest and the medicine man for his society. And he really wants visitors to feel welcome, but he also wants them to know that this place needs to be treated with respect. Says this is a place of prayer, not just for Zuni, but for many other tribal communities who call this place home. So yeah, and I'm also not gonna attempt to say that, but that's the name that the Zuni people have for this place, where they believe they came from the world before to this current world that we're living in today. So a lot of river trips go down to this area with the tribal members, and they always pay respect and do their own prayers and their songs here at this site. Another place of importance in the canyon is the confluence, where the larger Colorado River and the little Colorado River meet up. And in this area, we have a location that's very, very important to the Hopi people, which they call the Sipapuni. And if you've ever been out to Desert View or visited Hopi lands, kivas are still in use today. They're usually a ceremonial structure built into the ground where there's a ladder in the middle that you climb in and out of. And at the watchtower here at the park, they have a bottom floor is called the kiva room. And you'll see that ladder right there in the middle of the room. And in a ceremonial kiva, right by that ladder, you'll have a small hole there. And what that hole represents is the Sipapuni, where again, the Hopi came from the world before to this current world that we're in today. So this area, the confluence, is very, very important to the Hopi. They have members of certain societies who come here and also give their own prayers and offerings to this area. And I'm gonna play another short clip of Lee, who explains that confluence area.
Canyon has a spirit.
What's kind of
They say that we emerge from the Grand Canyon, the place called Sipapuni, which is the trail to the underworld. And then from there we emerge into this present world. And eventually we will travel into the spiritual world. And when that happens, our spirit travels to the Grand Canyon, particularly around the area of the confluence. And that is a home for our ancestral people and their spirits. And from the Grand Canyon, the spirits travel throughout the world as clouds. So every day they are with us. So I hope that the visitors will share that kind of feeling, that the Grand Canyon and humanity are all one.
So yeah, that's a couple of places here in the canyon that have like a huge, huge meaning to the Zuni and the Hopi people, because that's their birthplace. And it's really important to acknowledge that Native people come from this canyon. This is where we first had our experiences in this world that we're currently in. Another place here is Deer Creek. That has a huge importance to the Southern Paiute. This place has many, many stories and a lot of important resources like the willow, the cactus, the watercress. it's said that this area has been used for many, many years for farming, for hunting, camping, and like ceremonial purposes. And then when European explorers and settlers were coming to this area, it was a place of refuge. It was a sanctuary for the Paiute people to come to. And I just wanted to play this and want us all to just take a quick break and kind of think of places that have this huge meaning to us in our lives, and just kind of realize that connection that Indigenous people have to sites like Deer Creek Falls. So I'm just gonna play this. But yeah, that's Deer Creek Falls, and it's just a very special place. And I guess there are some issues with that area and aspects of recreation, such as canyoneering that was going on there. And I think it was abused and all of that, to the point where a former superintendent of the park actually banned that recreational activity in this area, just due to that cultural importance that this place has to the Southern Paiute and the Kaibab Band of Paiute. So I thought that was really cool action taken by the park management to help preserve these sacred spaces. If you've ever been on a river trip, you may have seen the salt mines, as we call it, here in the canyon. And that's a very, very significant spot to different tribes like the Zuni, the Hopi, the Wallapai, because they collect salt from there. A lot of the river trips that the tribal members are on, that's what they'll do. And they'll use that for their own like ceremonial, nutritional purposes. There's stories about the Hopi who live about a 2.5-hour drive to the east from here, who would actually run and walk from Hopi lands, the 3 Hopi mesas, to these areas, collect the salt, and then walk and run all the way back to their villages. And they'll give the salt to the female members there. So yeah, it's just been a practice that's been done for as long back as we can remember. And I wanted to include this quote from Ronnie again, talking about how, like, if we collect the salt, we should still do it in a traditional way by making an offering. And that goes back to us having that reciprocal relationship with the canyon. Whatever you take, you gotta give back. To provide an example as far as pinon picking, since that's a lot of the trees around here in the park is pinon trees. In Diné culture, we still do that. And you probably noticed while you've been here in the fall time, when there's a pinon harvest, there's all these cars parked on the side of the road and people are kneeling underneath the trees with like a blanket or a bluebird flower sack. And we're like picking the pinon nuts off the ground. And we were always told that you wait until those pinon nuts fall from the tree before you take them. Because again, you wait until something's given to you. You don't just take. But then you'll also see people whacking the tree with a branch. So it goes both ways. But yeah, I wanted to bring this up with the collecting salt. So another resource here in the canyon that we have a deep relationship with is our night sky. And a lot of you know that Grand Canyon is an international dark sky park, meaning that we have some of the clearest night skies on the entire planet. And I'm sure you've all seen our night skies, especially during the winter time. It's so, so beautiful, seeing the Milky Way and all of that. But a lot of the tribal communities here have our own stories about these constellations and the Milky Way that we see up there. Our own stories about what the Big Dipper is, about what the North Star is. In Navajo, we call the North Star Nahak-o-spik-o, which means central fire. So we have our own names for these things. And a lot of what the night sky looks like, and even the moon, tells us how to live our lifestyle, what we should do that day, and that type of stuff. And a lot of it has to relate to agriculture, to farming. So when we see certain constellations in the sky, we know that's when we need to start planting. Then when we see another constellation in the sky, oh, that's when we start harvesting. And then the Hopi have a calendar based off of the moon cycle. So yeah, it's just a strong relationship that many of the cultures have to the night sky here. And that same association that made us a dark sky park, the International Dark Sky Association, made the Kaiba Banda Paiute a dark sky nation. So what that means is that the Kaiba Banda Paiute get these different resources and tourism for them to help preserve their heritage and their teachings in regards to the night sky, because they have many, many stories about the stars. If you ever get a chance, Pipe Creek, I think it's National Monument up north of us, Autumn Gerard gives a lot of programs up there. She's a Paiute park ranger, and she's done a couple of things here at Star Party for us. So that's a really good place to, if you want to learn more about the relationship that our tribal communities have to the night sky. And we're hoping to bring that here into the park more too. So yeah, that's some different resources we have connections to here at the canyon that kind of shows you that relationship that we have to the pictographs and the petroglyphs, the canyon itself, the river, the springs, you know, list goes on. But I want to include this quote from a Zuni tribal member who kind of talks about how everything here in the canyon is alive, and just like any other living being, the canyon can be harmed, injured, and hurt when it is gouged or any other ways mistreated. And a big concept in many cultures is harmony and balance. Like, we need to live in peace and harmony with where we're at. And we also need to keep things in balance, meaning going back to that, where we give back what we take. So we sit here and we think, what's happened to Grand Canyon in the past 100 years or so that kind of threw off that balance, that threw off that harmony? And a really big one is the dam. The dam that was built back in the 1960s. This is a painting done by, I think his name's Norman Rockwell, pretty famous artist, who painted this image of a Navajo family looking off in the distance at the Glen Canyon Dam. And I wanted to include this quote from a Diné woman, how she says, in our culture, upsetting the balance of the natural world is the greatest crime a human can commit. And that dam not only created like ecological issues in terms of affecting the temperature of the river and the flow of the river, but it also caused disturbances to the culture that's here. A big one is how the reservoir, which is known as Lake Powell, has covered up many, many sites over on the other side of the dam there. This was all Glen Canyon at one point, but there's many cliff dwellings, pottery, pictographs and petroglyphs, all of that that's buried under Lake Powell. So that was a big thing. And then how the river, this was all just a river at one point. And these bands of Paiute who are up to the north of us, they can't really access the river as they used to, because now there's this giant reservoir that's there now, and this physical barrier. And the Zuni have a really strong relationship with the river here in terms of like their spiritual ancestors. There's this quote from Octavius who explains how like their ancestral spirits would walk across the river and visit each other. But now that that dam's there, it kind of disturbs that. There's another story too about how the Zuni would do prayers and offerings into the tributaries that go into the Little Colorado and the larger Colorado rivers. And those flow down the river, but then they get trapped at something physical like the dam, and it doesn't flow all the way to the Gulf as intended. So those are just a couple of disturbances in regards to that. But the other big disturbance here is the loss of land. The loss that we have to this place that many of these tribal communities have been living in essentially since time immemorial. I wanted to just include these maps because again, they're the best I could find. And the left side shows these like traditional territories of these tribes, where on the right side, these are the federal boundaries of reservations today. The one that stands out to me the most is the Yavapai Apache. It's like this big old red pink area here, just right to the north and west of Phoenix. And now it's just like these little tiny spots down here that's between Flagstaff and Phoenix today, near the Camp Verde area. And with the Yavapai Apache, they were just recently federally recognized in the past 100 years because their population went down to a couple hundred. And then once they built it back up to over 1,000, that's when they became federally recognized by the United States government. But yeah, here at Grand Canyon, we have an unfortunate history of forcing people out of this area to make this a national park. Forced removal exists here. It exists in Yosemite and Yellowstone, Glacier, you know, the list goes on and on. And the story here that some of you may be familiar with is with President Theodore Roosevelt when he came here in 1903. It's said that he went down the Bright Angel Trail and he talked with 2 Havasupai tribal members who are living down in what's now, well then Indian Garden, now Havasupai Gardens. So he talked to Big Jim and Billy Burrow, and he kind of said to them like, hey, like you need to move out of here, you need to leave, like we're creating a park in this area. And some Havasupai tribal members listened to him. It said that Big Jim moved up to a cave, but he was still farming in the Havasupai Garden area. And then with Billy Burrow and his wife, they stayed there. They didn't move anywhere until the NPS forcibly removed them in 1928, which is not even 100 years ago. And it's a really, really harsh history, something that's happened, but it needs to be acknowledged because we can't push something like this under the rug. We can't sugarcoat it. We can't water it down because generational trauma exists. Even though myself or another living tribal member hasn't experienced something like this, it's still felt in us today through language loss, through our disconnect to the land, through our heritage loss, and just thinking about what our ancestors went through and what they experienced for us to exist today. They're very strong and resilient, and that's just kind of what they had to do, what they were faced with once this park was created. And they did that in ways of working like the Hopi House, doing dances here in the park. And that's kind of led to how heavily they rely on tourism today for financial revenue and to share a culture. Yeah, it's just a really unfortunate history. It's kind of hard for me to talk about, so I apologize, but I'm just really grateful to these people who stayed strong and adapted to what was around them, and just to help keep our culture alive. And I wanted to include some of these historical photographs. I got to spend a lot of time at our museum archives here, and it's really cool that a lot of these photos were taken by Eddie McKee, which I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with. He had a pretty good relationship with a lot of the tribal communities. There's him standing with the Hopi man. And then this is when he went down to Havasupai. That's one of the Havasupai packers, mule packers. So a lot of these photos, and there's a lot more photos. I hope you can have the opportunity to ever get a chance and look at more that he took. That's coming from him and his wife's, I guess their their photo archives. So it's been really interesting to see how like our tribal members then just adapted to working with the National Park Service and how we're still doing that today. Like I'm an employee here. The tribal members who work with the Intertribal Working Group do a lot to help us feel safe and connected back to this place. So yeah, reconnecting to the canyon, first steps, acknowledging, such as talking about what has happened here and generational trauma. That way we can move forward and know that something like what's happened here is gonna happen again. It's not gonna happen again. There's been a lot of attempts at cultural awareness training for our park staff. Being an Indigenous person working for a federal agency like the National Park Service, it can be pretty tough sometimes, but having our allies and having people realize like how our beliefs fit into like this bureaucracy here really, really helps us in feeling safe and feeling like we can be a part of this team to do what's best for this park and for our visitors and for ourselves. Yeah, acknowledging harmful, inappropriate terminology and discontinuing the use of words like ruins and abandoned when referring to ancestral home sites in the canyons, such as the cliff dwellings, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation. The park is fee-free for members of the 11 associated tribes. So when they come through the entrance station, they shouldn't have to pay because we shouldn't have to pay to access our homelands. So a lot of tribal members can come to the park here, which is unfortunately not known to the tribal communities to a larger extent, because I know a lot of my family members don't know that, even though I try to tell them, but they're like, it's embarrassing to say that we're Navajo just to get in free. Like, I don't know. So hopefully the park figures out a system for that. But yeah, and then also supporting pilgrimages into the canyon and ceremonial plant gathering. So that's James Equala, who most of you may be familiar with. He does a lot here at the park. And this past year, every full moon, he's been hiking down Bright Angel Trail to Havasupai Gardens and doing his own prayers and offerings at that site, which the park heavily supports, which is really nice. Pinon picking is allowed in the park as well. So Navajo families will come from the res. They'll come into the park when it's harvest season, and then we'll be picking pinon for the many pinon trees around here. And of course, what's going on North Rim with the bison, how like the hunters came in and then that bison meat was allocated to tribal members a lot in the plains area, and how they're talking about doing a live bison relocation to these tribal lands, since the bison population across the canyon is kind of getting out of control. And that's really neat that they're working with tribes that way to kind of maintain that. But yeah, so like I mentioned, it's a big step to acknowledge what's happened here and then move forward from that. And just a couple months ago, the official name change of Indian Garden to Havasupai Gardens happened here, that I'm sure everyone's heard of by now. And it's really neat what the interpretive staff and the law enforcement staff are planning to do down there. They're planning to do more programming that's coming from Havasupai tribal members themselves. They're planning to make a little area that tribal members can stay at when they go down the canyon for their prayers and offerings. So that's been really nice that's what that area is kind of turning into. Because that term Indian, I grew up like in a family and a community that didn't appreciate that word, just because that's not who we are. We're Indigenous. It's said that our creation stories are here. And I've heard from one tribal member say, like, we shouldn't be labeled as the like the white man's mistake. So that's really good that they changed that term here. I know a lot of other tribes and a lot of other people have their own sayings about it, but generally in the Southwest here, that term is not appreciated. Yeah, and then intertribal working groups are a really big thing, especially what's happening out at Desert View with the Tribal Welcome Center there. This was taken back in May when they did the ceremony, the dedication ceremony for it. So a lot of these people have been part of this project for many, many years, and it's really cool that there's the groundbreakings happening on it, and that hopefully we get this space where we can tell our own stories, because it's really good we're getting this information out there, but it's important that this information comes directly from us. And that's what the goal of this Welcome Center is. So I wanted to quickly play this short clip again about what's going to happen out at Desert View if some of you are not familiar with it.
My name is Jonah Hill. I am Hopi silversmith, and we are at the Desert View Watchtower. Hot fire. I specialize in a jewelry process called tufa casting, which is using a volcanic stone where you carve into one side of the stone and pour metal into it to produce a piece of jewelry. It's a very old process. It was introduced to the Navajo people by the Spanish silversmiths. It eventually made its way out into Hopi. It's a really fun process. You know, the stone is found widely on the reservation. I go out and mine it. Coming into this area, there's a lot of people from across the world, across the United States, who are ignorant of the people of this area. Are you Indian? Do you live in a teepee? Where are all the other Indians? You know, I get that a lot. To me, I kind of take that in stride. As a demonstrator, it's part of what I do is to help to educate them on who the people are in this land, as well as the art forms that we practice, so that they walk away from this place enlightened.
It's important to understand that the Grand Canyon has a really challenging history with our tribal neighbors. It started with how the park was created. We forcibly removed people who lived here from time immemorial. And then for 100 years or so, we kept them from the park. We've essentially made them strangers in their own lands. I've come to realize that I can't manage this park without a true partnership. They understand this place in ways that we don't. They connect to this place in ways that we don't. I'm at the Desert View Watchtower, where we're about to break ground on a new construction project that will allow tribal neighbors to help us both interpret and manage this place. We get 6 million visitors a year to the Grand Canyon. Vending opportunities, cultural demonstrations, that'll help create a complete interpretive experience for our visitors.
The plans for the Desert View Watchtower Cultural Center is something really big and exciting to me. It's going to be huge for Native peoples, Native artists, and for the park itself.
This is a really important cornerstone project to provide a really honest and complete interpretation of the history of the Grand Canyon based on respect for our tribal partners, and expand that vision across the park.
Partnership between the Grand Canyon, the Park Service, and the Native tribes is going to be very important in bridging a gap. Visitors are going to be learning from the tribal people. The park's going to be helping the tribe to bring recognition to this community.
Yeah, so that's kind of what's going on over at Desert View. And what's going on right now is our cultural demonstration program. It's been happening here at the Visitor Center. Every weekend we have a different demonstrator, like a Navajo weaver, a moccasin maker, like a Hopi kachina carver, Zuni silversmith, you know, all these different talented people who are doing these practices that have been, again, passed down from generation to generation and helping keep our heritage and our culture alive. So that's a big project that's been going on for a couple years now and will continue to do so. I know I have a couple minutes left, so I'll kind of go through this. But yeah, we do some park events. Rock Your Mount is a big thing in November. It was really cool that this is me and Kelly, a Navajo Park Ranger out at Desert View, where we got to wear our moccasins with our MPS uniform, with our Ranger uniform. So it's really neat to see, like at this national level, that the MPS is kind of reevaluating our uniform policy so that not only us, but all these different cultures across the country can share and showcase our heritage in a way, whether that's where we wear more jewelry, the way we wear our hair, wearing moccasins and whatnot. So that's something that's been happening. Here in the park, we do a lot of youth park programs. You know, Grand Canyon is the only park in the US that has a K-12 school, and a lot of our students are Native. And this was back in April, me and Kelly again. And we did a walkthrough through the village with them. And we asked, do you feel represented? And they said no. And we said, do you want to be a park ranger? And they all said no. So we're kind of sad to see that disconnect that our local youth here have to this place. And we really hope to build that back up. So yeah, we're still here. Going back to the beginning of the presentation where we said the Bright Angel Trail sign that calls us prehistoric, like that's just not true. Like we're still people who exist today and have this really strong tie and connection to the canyon here. A really big part, like great resource, is the Voices of Grand Canyon. That's been done by the Grand Canyon Trust. That's where I got some of my videos from. And there's a lot of knowledge and history that's shared on that. So if you just Google Voices of Grand Canyon, if you haven't seen this website yet, it's really, really good. So that's just a resource for you if you're interested in learning more. And yeah, all of this, honestly, a big part of why it's possible is because of the leadership we have in this, like currently right now. And the big one is having like Deb Holland as the Secretary of Interior, who oversees the management of public lands that's managed by the NPS, the Forest Service, the Bureau of Reclamation, you know, Fish and Wildlife, list goes on. So that's a really big deal. And also having Chuck Sams as the National Park Service Director. He's the first Indigenous person to serve in that role. And he got to come back here in August. And I got to meet him a couple of times, and his presentations always involved that we need to be shifting this narrative of this dominant narrative that's always been told of the park. That's the Euro-American explorer, the pioneer, over to these other stories that have been unshared for so long. So he fully supports that. And then this is a very near and dear colleague of mine. I worked with her at Navajo National Monument, Curlinda Black Sheep. She served in several leadership roles, including out at Devil's Tower and over at Glen Canyon. Now she's currently a training specialist here at the Albright Training Center. So she gets to lead trainings and be a part of constructing these trainings for park rangers all across the country in ways to help them, you know, interpret Indigenous knowledge and all these other stories across the country that need to be shared. So thank you so much for, again, being a part of this and taking time of your evening to just to listen to this. And I hope you kind of learn something new. And I like to end with this quote from a Dene woman about how the canyon's a sacred space. We go there with prayers in our heart, purpose on our mind, purpose in our steps, and then you just leave it the way you found it. So thank you all again for being here. And if you have any questions, I can stick around.
That's awesome, Kelkiyana. This is really, really nice. And the sound worked perfectly.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it was really, really good. You know, I've got a question for you. I know you do not represent anyone else but yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to look ahead 50 years, just a long way, how would you like to see the National Park Service and its management embrace Indigenous stewardship countrywide? How would you play with that 50-year horizon?
Yeah, I think a big thing is the place names, because renaming a place with that tribal perspective really means a lot to us. And it also helps with language preservation. That's a really, really big thing. And it helps just, once you know the name of a place, then you know the stories of that place too. Like that's what you can draw from. So I think that's a big thing. I really hope to see the NPS acknowledged more.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just traditional ecological knowledge, meaning that we share how we connect to this landscape and what we use certain things for, whether that's the plants, like the rocks, the minerals, you know. So that's, I think those be the two that I hope is a common knowledge across NPS sites.
Okay. one of the things I think about when I think of the National Park Service is the Organic Act, and that language in the act that says, and I'm not sure of exact quote, in such manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. How does that language sit with you, again, looking forward the next 50 years?
Yeah, even just the National Park Service mission talking about, yeah, I think it's very similar to what the Organic Act is. Like we understand like the meaning behind it, but it totally kind of erases like that native presence and that connection that we have to these places. And that's fortunately been acknowledged by the management here. Here at our Interpretation and Resources Division, we've been looking at our core values, and we're trying to like get away from that type of language, even though it's like our official like mission and everything, but like, hey, we need to go towards something that's more inclusive. And I really think in 50 years, the Park Service will kind of be away from that. They'll have these integral core pieces of what the original mission is still, but with those amendments to it, that's more inclusive and more diverse.
Yeah,
so I
cool.
hope that comes about.
Got it. Thank you for including that Rockwell painting. I always, it was pointed out to me by a friend in Page. The young boy there stands with clenched fists. It was destructive not only to the indigenous peoples there, but as you point out to the resource. I think Rockwell very subtly captured that.
Yeah, that's really great that he did that.
Yeah. I'm just going to look through chat here. Lots of thank yous, great presentations. The emphasis on a more visionary outlook than in the past with inclusion and respect cannot be overemphasized. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really, really great. If anyone has any questions now for Kelkiyana, just unmute yourself and say who you are and bring your questions forward. I really appreciated another thing you mentioned about living landscapes, because these places are alive, and we sort of look out there and think, oh, well, there's nothing going on there, but oh my gosh, so alive, so rich, and so robust everywhere you look.
Yeah.
Really, really fascinating. Personally, where do you see yourself in another 20 years?
Yeah, I have a very deep connection to my old park, Navajo National Monument. And because I grew up 5 miles from there, I'm a 4th generation park ranger there. I've heard so many stories of what my great grandpa and my grandpa and my aunts done while working there. And I just want to continue that legacy of stewardship that they had for the place. That's honestly where my heart and soul is.
Cool.
If you've never been there, it's a free park. And my goal right now is to go back and be superintendent there. So that's what I want to do. Yeah. But while I'm getting there, I intend to stay here at Grand Canyon for a while. I really appreciate working with the tribes here. So yeah, I intend to be here for a while longer.
Awesome.
Yeah, I have a question. Can I jump in?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Kelkiyana, really thought-provoking presentation. Thank you. You used, and I hear the term sacred quite a bit, and as I'm sure you know, sacred means different things to different people, different cultures, different times in history. Can you talk a little bit more about what sacred means in the way that you were using it in this presentation today?
Yeah, so sacred the way I was trying to use it today is having that connection to a place where it goes back many, many years. Like it's a long-standing relationship, like a positive relationship that not only myself, but others before me have to it. Like that sacred that's what it means to me, is like the ancestral knowledge, the ancestral experiences that happened in a certain place. So that's what it means to me when I use that term, that it's just a way to honor and respect something that's connected to my ancestors. Does that make sense?
It does. I imagine it also includes a feeling of the spiritual connection. So that I mean, you talked about, the storage facilities, the spirits are very much there. So I imagine that's part of the.
Yeah, that's a
meaning
part of
for
it too, acknowledging that spiritual presence that exists there.
Great, thank you.
This is Mickey White, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. And I have kind of a couple things. I lived in Grand Canyon Village in the summers from about 1954 to 1970, and I worked for Fred Harvey. And at one time, I lived in 1964, I lived in the White Boys dorm, and next door was the Indian Boys dorm, and that was the same year the Civil Rights Bill passed Congress that outlawed that. And most of the people that I actually worked with were Indigenous people. And they've kind of been erased in the history of Fred Harvey. And like in the little museum, Bright Angels stuff, there's no, nothing there about all the Indigenous people who worked for Fred Harvey. And I was a couple things, is there plaques where those dorms were, the Indian boys and Indian girls dorms? And is there any movement to try to resurrect the people who worked there basically from the beginning of the park until now? Because it's great that you have the picture of Native people who work there now, by the way.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, there's a couple of attempts right now. The Bright Angel History Room, we've actually reached out to, I can't remember, is it Xanterra or Delaware North who operate that now? But we reached out to them last summer about it, like including stuff, because there's that Harvey girl exhibit that's right there. There's that mannequin inside that room of the Harvey girl dressed in a velveteen blouse and like Navajo jewelry. And I always saw that coming here to the park, and I was just like, I always felt weird about seeing that. So anyway, we brought that up, and we're wondering if we can talk about the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation in terms of that exhibit that's there.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's a project that we're hoping to pick back up off the ground. And then I didn't know that about the dormitories, but that would be something really important to acknowledge there, especially in the village, because the train that comes in with all these visitors, a lot of those visitors just stick to that area, and that village we really should hard hit with more inclusive stories and knowledge to be shared there. And a couple of our other park rangers here give programs about like the Japanese bellboys that used to work at like El Tovar, and talking about the Black employees who also worked at El Tovar. There's a story of them, how they were kind of pushed to the back after they brought the Harvey girls in. So that's just information that we're trying to get out more in our intern programs to, like you said, share that presence that so many communities have had here since the beginning, but are not as highlighted as much. So yeah, we're working on it.
Awesome.
The Indian Boys dorm was what's now called the annex behind the men's dorm in Grand Canyon. So it's that brown building behind there is the Indian Boy, or was the Indian Boys dorm when I worked at Harvard.
Okay, yeah, that's really good to know. Thank you so much.
Kelkiyana,
Yeah.
This is Susie Verkamp. My heart's incredibly full. I really loved your presentation. And, I was born and raised there at the Canyon, and my family is part of that, that dominant narrative. And in my own way, I'm doing a lot of writing too. It's sort of hoping to push back against that narrative a bit myself, but it's just wonderful to hear you. And I love Navajo National Monument. And I love that you have that family history there. That's just been really interesting to me. But I just, I couldn't be more grateful for your presence and your presentation. Long overdue, and I just love that the true narratives, the really authentic narratives are being brought forward. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And I don't know if you knew, my grandpa, his name's Al Grieve. He's a trader, and he always came to bird camps. So
yes, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I'm still on, but yeah, I actually have a beautiful little rug that your grandfather gave my dad. And
oh, nice.
yeah. So there's all these connections, and so
Yeah, definitely.
it'll be fun. I look forward to meeting you and getting to know you. And
Yeah, of course. Same to you. Thank you so much for being here.
yeah, thank you.
Hi, this is Keith Green. Am I on?
Yeah, I
Hi,
can hear
Keith.
you.
Yeah. Oh, hi. And thank you. This was a really nice presentation. As an ex-interpreter anyway, I find that what this means is that the history of the Grand Canyon needs to be rewritten with Native American history and included in it better. That is, presentations that are made about history need to include Native American history as well. But that's a lot of information in one place. But
Yeah. Yeah, we're really hoping we can get a lot of that out at Desert View with the new Tribal Welcome Center coming. But the big goal is to get it all across the park. So hopefully we get it in the village, in the Inner Canyon, North Rim, even just in our everyday signs that are here. That's one good step to start getting this information out there.
right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hi, this is Sheldon. I'm not quite sure how this works. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we can hear
Sheldon.
you.
Oh, great. Thanks. I wanted to ask, over the years and even throughout the presentation, I've heard many terms used, everything from First Nations, Native people, Indigenous people, Native Americans, even the map that you showed for one of the Paiute bands even said Paiute Indian tribe. What's the best, most accepted, most respectful term to use if we're not talking about a specific group of people, but generally the early inhabitants of this area? Is it Indigenous people, Native people? What do you think?
Yeah, a common one we use here is Indigenous, and then also tribal communities. So those are two terms that are pretty good. And then, but it's also important on how you use it, like the context behind it, because like we shouldn't be grouping different tribes together. But if you're talking about them in general, like, oh, like the 11 tribal communities of Grand Canyon, then that's important that there's that distinguishment, that you're not grouping all these tribes together, because we're all different. Even in Navajo, I grew up on the western side of the reservation, like compared to the eastern side of the reservation, like we have different dialects and even different beliefs about certain things. So yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you again, Kelkiyana, for your wonderful presentation. And I hope that there will be more of these presentations like this from you and from other people you recommend that have a similar message. Because I think this outreach, as you say, needs to go beyond the watchtower and beyond this park.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will bid everyone good night. We hope to see you again the second Tuesday of next month at 6 o'clock. All right, y'all. Take care. Good night.
Then if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'll put my email in chat if you have more questions or anything like that. Thank you again.
Cool. That'll be great. And I'm going to wait for just a minute to get that email in chat. It's Kelkiyana Yazzie at nps.gov. I'll spell that out. KELKIYANA_YAZZIE at nps.gov. Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.